Many of the sayings and anecdotes attributed to the first Duke of Wellington are apocryphal, but not all. The letter that I have here in front of me today demonstrates the force and authenticity of one of them. That in a fit of annoyance, extreme anger, he described the men of the British Army, the common soldiers, as the scum of the earth. Between 1793 and 1815, Britain and her allies were engaged in a long struggle against France and Napoleon, a world war in all but name. In 1813, Wellington commanded Britain's major army on the continent with the forces of Portuguese allies and some of the Spanish who were opposed to the French. Joseph Bonaparte, put on the throne of Spain by his brother Napoleon, had been ordered out of the country, and retreating from the Allies, he took with him as much of the Spanish crown's goods as he could. On the 21st of June, Wellington caught up with him at Vittoria in northeastern Spain and comprehensively defeated the French. Joseph's baggage train and the goods of French officers fell into Allied hands. The rank and file had glimpses of unimaginable wealth as the enemy fled towards the Pyrenees. This was an occasion for plunder. The discipline of the British Army, which Wellington had long regarded as suspect, could not be sustained. On the 2nd of July, Wellington wrote a testy private letter to Lord Bathurst. Bathurst was Secretary of State for War and the Colonies and the Duke's political superior in London. About 14% of his army were unaccounted for and plundering. The Duke had a serious problem of manpower. My dear Lord, I enclose the copy of a letter from the Governor of Vittoria, which shows how our men are going on in that neighbourhood. These men are detachments from the different regiments of the army who were sent to Vittoria the day after the battle, each under officers, in order to collect the wounded and their arms and accoutrements. It is quite impossible for me or any other man to command a British army under the existing system. We have in the service the scum of the earth as common soldiers. Wellington's orders had not been obeyed. The lower ranking officers were not capable of enforcing discipline, and the non-commissioned officers were not sufficiently distinguished from the rank and file to make any difference. Yet these men were the key link in the chain of command, conveying the officers' instructions and orders to the rank and file. There was insufficient sanction against all of these parties. The Governor of Vittoria had complained, "I cannot give an idea of the abuses committed in this city and the surrounding area by the English soldiers. The peaceful citizen is harassed, property is not respected, houses, shops and government offices are broken into." Commerce had in fact been destroyed and there were food shortages. The Governor asked Wellington to appoint a judge to bring an end to the problem and to ensure severity of punishment. Wellington, working through the incoming correspondence, wrote an instruction down this left-hand side to his Spanish liaison officer, who then translates it and sends it as a letter to the Governor. What it says is, "Write him that I shall be very much obliged to him if he will be so kind as to have taken up and brought before Major Burton, the English officer who commands the British troops at Vittoria, any soldier guilty of an outrage or even of being outside of the town without a pass, and to have the proof produced of the outrage he may have committed, and such soldier will be punished." The Adjutant General, whose massive letterbooks are among Wellington's papers, was responsible for discipline. He duly communicated the Duke's displeasure to Major Burton. The soldiers at Vittoria were to be kept under arms on parade for 8 hours a day. A Provost Marshal was sent to Vittoria as well to execute on the spot any soldier found plundering or committing an act of mutiny. There was a serious question about Burton himself. He was the responsible officer at Vittoria, and these offences had been committed on his watch. Evidence also suggested that the position of the governor of Vittoria was opaque in a case relating to the removal of French treasure, money that Wellington had sought keenly to fund his own army. Over the next fortnight, Wellington became much less disposed to believe the governor, and the Duke complained to the Spanish government about his extraordinary and injudicious conduct. Burton seems to have been exonerated. In London, at exactly this point in 1813, a bill was before Parliament to allow soldiers to be tried immediately on the spot. It had been altered to take account of the Duke's suggestions. The Act was duly passed and sent to Wellington by Bathurst on the 22nd of July, and at the same time Bathurst responded to the events of Vittoria. I am aware that the provisions of this Act will not enable your Lordship to repress that spirit of plunder, outrage and insubordination which I most deeply regret to find has broken out since the Battle of Vittoria in the army under your command. Wellington was to exercise summary justice in cases of urgent necessity. Officers were not to be exempt from the consequences of lack of attention to their duty. In the same letter, Bathurst proposed increasing the pay of sergeants major and of some other sergeants in the regiments to differentiate them further from the rank and file. The success of Wellington's operations at Vittoria meant that France was close at hand, and any disorder as the army entered that country could seriously disrupt the operations to conclude the war. Wellington's disparaging description of the soldiers of his army as the scum of the earth is notorious today. At best, it was an ungenerous remark from a commander exasperated by disorder among his troops, some thousands of whom had turned to plunder after the battle. In short, the pursuit of the French was hindered by the actions of his own troops. It was, however, a remark made in private correspondence. It was not made public until 1838, when it was printed in the edition of the Dispatches. These volumes, put together under Wellington's direction, put before the public a long and extensive series of his papers as a thoughtful exercise in shaping the memory of the wars.